Okay, welcome back. So we've talked there a little bit about Alan's exit and almost the case for Joyce and the case of how he may not have done as bad as some of the criticism that we've had of him. Nonetheless, the vultures are circling for him. Now, we had some reaction today from the unions. Now, presumably, on hearing the news that Alan Joyce has gone, they've gone, let bygones be bygones, let's shake hands.
I could hear the sound of champagne corks popping from our offices in North Sydney.
Yes. What has been their reaction to him going? We can imagine what it's been, but what have they?
Some of them have reacted more diplomatically than others.
Good on them.
Yeah, so the TWU, as can be expected, has come out swinging, really putting the boot in as Joyce has gone out the door. Michael Caine said that Joyce's exit is the first good decision the Qantas board has made for a very long time. He did not hold back. He said, Alan Joyce is slipping into retirement 2 months early with a $24 million pay packet, leaving one of the biggest messes in corporate Australia's history in his wake, after finally receiving the public scrutiny he deserves for trashing one of Australia's most cherished companies. Alan Joyce is exiting with a $10 million bonus announced on Friday. This is a classic Joyce move. Pretend to take responsibility while pocketing obscene amounts of money. He must be stripped of those bonuses immediately.
I wonder what the unions say about the bank bosses that profited obscene amounts of
Probably nothing good.
profit and bonuses. And
I don't think the unions are charitable towards anyone who pockets large bonuses.
Yeah,
Not
guess so.
that anyone who pockets a large bonus needs charity.
Very true.
The Australian Services Union was a bit more restrained. Assistant National Secretary Emmeline Gask did condemn what the union said was a merciless drive for profits under Joyce's tenure. She said incoming Qantas management now has a rare opportunity to rebuild the relationship between the airline and its workers and customers. Frontline workers have borne the brunt of years of outsourcing and cost-cutting, and their stress levels have soared as travel volumes have returned but staffing levels have not. This has flowed through to people's travel experiences, with customers enduring cancelled flights, lost baggage and overall inadequate service. She has called for Qantas to, quote, hit the reset button. The TWU wants, and as we'll see in a moment, the AIPA wants, basically for Qantas to work more closely with the unions on investing in its workforce, securing people's jobs, improving pay and conditions. She says, if this once iconic airline wants to rebuild its reputation with the Australian people and ensure it is around for another 100 years, it must start investing in the people that made it great in the first place, its people. The AIPA, the Australian International Pilots Association, the biggest pilots union at Qantas, says has agreed that there is a circuit breaker from Joyce stepping down, and Tony Lucas, Captain Tony Lucas, the president of AIPA, says his members trust that Ms. Hudson recognises the power of respecting and valuing all Qantas staff. He said, we look forward to working constructively with incoming CEO Vanessa Hudson to rebuild our iconic airline into the respected and trusted brand that has made all Australians proud. So the vibe essentially from the unions is, we're glad to see the back of Alan Joyce. We want to draw a line under Alan Joyce now. We want to work with Vanessa Hudson to make sure that workers' interests are represented.
An interesting bit of kind of history is what happened when Jane Hartlock took over at Virgin. Now, she was previously despised personally by the unions. And I think, a couple of years ago, whatever, when she joined, I think my headline was something like, union nemesis, to take over at Virgin. And actually what happened is very quickly, she built a very good new relationship with the unions at Virgin. And what that's always shown me is that even though unions will do kind of tough talking press releases and they will always, have a very public front, they are ironically kind of businessmen themselves. They're business people, and they will always do you a deal. And I think that one thing with Joyce going and taking that kind of bad feeling away from them is there is a potential for a fresh start. And certainly the TWU will be going around that negotiating table and will say, look, what happened in the past has happened in the past. Let's get this onto a better relationship moving forward. One of Vanessa Hudson's first jobs in this role is going to be repairing that relationship, which is sort of broken, because they need to have a better relationship moving forward. One of the issues with Joyce's awful relationship with the unions is it just causes more and more bad publicity because they're going to be generating more and more bad stories. And one of the interesting things has been all the bad publicity that Qantas has received in the last 18 months, and yet Virgin, who've had many of the same problems in terms of delays and cancellations, etc. They have had almost no bad publicity in mainstream media, and a lot of that is because they have a better relationship with the unions. So I think that's going to be one of the first jobs in Vanessa's in tray.
Speaking of people who personally despised Alan Joyce, we cannot overlook ALP Senator Tony Sheldon.
Oh, of course.
Joyce's longtime nemesis, Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, I believe you said last week, and we're not certain who's who. But Tony Sheldon, again, was another one to give Alan Joyce a kicking on the way out the door. He has also called for the resignation of Richard Goyder. I don't know why I keep saying David. Richard Goyder, the chair of... Sorry to anyone out there who's called David Goyder. I'm sure you're very good at your job. He's called for the resignation of Richard Goyder. He said, the Qantas board cannot hide behind Joyce's resignation. Richard Goyder should go next. The board has backed Joyce's behaviour at every step and must be held equally accountable for the disgraceful state of the company. Sheldon has said, quote, Alan Joyce's Qantas legacy is a workforce split across 38 companies and a brand now synonymous with low pay, insecure work, illegal sackings, and consumer rip-offs. He says, if the board allows Mr. Joyce to walk away with $24 million after illegally sacking 1,700 people, gouging customers, and while subject to an ACCC prosecution, it will be the swindle of the century.
I do. One of the sort of things that's interesting by Qantas, for context here, is that even though Joyce has had a lot of criticism in the last 18 months, Richard has kind of steadfastly stuck by Alan Joyce, and in fact, if anything, it looked like his exit would stretch into next year because he was so backed by the board. So I do understand the argument that if Joyce has sort of said I've got to take responsibility for this bad feeling and I've got to leave, then I could understand the argument is that Richard would have to go as well. I think if you're Qantas, the issue is that if he goes as well, then it does make them look incredibly guilty, and it makes them look like this is all falling apart. There's an element that if you're Richard Goyder at Qantas, you need to stay at the crease, defend your wicket for at least the next sort of 6 months or so. And
Goyder has said he's not going anywhere. He said that he needs to stay on to oversee the transition to Vanessa Hudson. So he's sort of resisted calls to step down as well. But I mean, as fiery as Tony Sheldon's statement was, I still don't think it compares to one of the all-time classic statements with regards to the retirement of a person in the aviation industry. This was from Albo himself, our Prime Minister, back in 2015 when he was the Shadow Transport Minister. A media statement on news that Sydney Airport Corporation Chairman Max Moore-Wilton plans to retire. The press release in its entirety, the statement was, good. And I was half expecting something like that from Sheldon today, but one thing with Tony Sheldon and Alan Joyce is he cannot resist putting the boot in. So the Qantas now are in this dilemma that they've got a number of kind of crucial kind of court appearances. One will be their appeal against the ruling that they were wrong to outsource so many people, a couple of thousand people. So they really need to try and win that, obviously. And of course, this ACCC case. Now, this ACCC case, when it comes to the federal court, will be arguably one of the kind of biggest court cases in Australian sort of history. It's going to be so high profile. And whereas usually, Qantas is in court quite a lot, which is the nature of being such a high profile company. But this is going to be something that's going to be pored over every single day. Exactly what is the evidence? Exactly what is the defence? So, I don't know exactly when this is going to take place. Presumably, this is going to happen sometime next year. It's going to be very, very hard for the business to kind of cleanse itself of this bad reputation until this whole thing is over. Correct. And what this does mean is that Vanessa has got a very, very tricky task, knowing that they've got these things hanging over them. When we look at, which is a totally different thing, but when we look at Boeing and the problems it had with the MAX and everything, and again, a massive aviation company that had all of this bad feeling, it was only when
the kind of legal proceedings came to an end, it was only when that they had to pay this huge fine that they were able to kind of dust themselves down and kind of move on. So I think the problem Qantas has got is they've got another 18 months or so of misery, regardless of whether they're guilty or not. And it's going to be very, very, very hard for Vanessa to say there's a clean start for a long time.
I will be interested to see if Vanessa Hudson, as an aside, sort of continues the history or the kind of the tradition of advocacy that Alan Joyce has been a part of, because very famously Alan Joyce was pro same-sex marriage during the postal survey, and very famously, or infamously, if you are reading some of our Facebook comments, he under Joyce, Qantas has come out in support of the voice referendum.
I would say if you're on the Yes campaign now, they probably don't want that back in now.
Probably not.
No, but I would say in terms of that, yes. I mean, it was when we look back at the gay marriage plebiscite vote, which again was like relatively close when it came out, and so Alan Joyce would be seen as.
Remember how calm that was in comparison to the voice referendum?
True.
That was a dogfight, but compared to the voice, it's like a walk in the park.
I would say that on that, and again, this is something that's been erased from history. Alan will be seen as somebody that was on the right side of history. He was arguably, I would say, the most high-profile gay man in Australia. Sure. So he took a big stand there, and I think that Qantas' support and his support was actually a big part of getting that over the line. So again, like everyone's very negative about him, but he has done some very brave and courageous things, I would say too. And
people are saying that like airlines and companies should stay out of politics, which is fair enough if you don't want Qantas saying, vote for Scott Morrison or vote for Anthony Albanese, sure. But I think this is an issue, and this is something I didn't get to say a few weeks ago because I had a cold. But this is something that, affects a lot of Qantas employees, a lot of Qantas customers. And as an aside, anyone saying that a company, that Qantas should stay out of politics and stick to flying planes, would they be saying that if Qantas had splashed no on the side of their planes?
Sure.
Controversial. The Facebook commenters are going to hate
me. But you're correct there, Jake. And they're not telling people how to vote.
Yeah.
They're not saying vote yes or vote no. All they're simply saying is we as an organisation are in support of saying yes. But they're not saying you must go and vote yes.
And they're giving people people from the yes side as well assistance with transport to get out to some of these remote communities to tell people out there what's going on with the voice.
Correct.
So before we wrap up the show, I'm gonna pose a question to you both now. So Vanessa will be starting as we record this tomorrow, probably as you listen to this today, on the Wednesday. She's in for a tough 18 months. Chris, you're obviously a mate with Joyce. You're one of the most, a very famous, influential thought leader in the aviation industry now. What would be if she came
the
to
Joyce
you,
Whisperer,
the Joyce Whisperer, Joyce Whisperer. If you were say an aviation consultant and she said, "I need your help," what advice are you going to give her for the next 18 months? What should she do if she wants to take on this task of sort of turning around Qantas' reputation?
First and foremost, go back to basics and focus on your customer.
Said like a true cabin crew manager.
Customers keep the airline flying.
One of the interesting things, and we've spoken about this before, is that when you choose who you're going to fly with, the single biggest thing is, and we might talk about the aircraft, the brutal reality, and I shouldn't say this on the show, the average punter couldn't care less what type of aircraft it was. How dare they? But what they
Philistines.
But what they do care about and what they remember the most is the customer service. That is absolutely 90% of why you choose to fly with an airline.
Or also the price.
Also the price. That's true. Also the price. That's also the price. But it's kind of like price cross cross with the quality of service you will receive. And this is you can talk about the numbers of delays and cancellations, but I would say that almost everyone that has flown with Qantas in the last year has had a bad experience and has been very loud about it. And I do think it's actually not so
Qantas
much...
and also Jetstar. We cannot forget the contribution that Jetstar is making to that.
It's true. And I know, even though, again, all airlines have had problems, it does feel from the kind of just listening to people that they have had it bad. So I do take your point that actually kind of like you need to get back to basics in terms of that.
Back to basics. And I think what's important is to re-engage the workforce as well. And I guess my message to the Qantas workforce is, as brutal as this will sound, get over it. Like, honestly, we get you're annoyed, we get you're upset, but don't take your frustrations to work because your frustrations flow through to the customer. And you give the customer a reason not to come back to Qantas.
In your experience, is it when there's bad feeling within an airline staff? Do you see that rubs off on their day to day?
Yeah, absolutely, it does, 100%. And it's not good. Check the attitude at the door when you start shift. Customers don't need to know what's going on behind the scenes. You may be peed off with your manager. You may be peed off with a company decision. That's okay. That's called being a human. But you don't take that attitude through to a customer area where your attitude or your actions will impact a customer's willingness to come back and give Qantas a second go.
We need more Chris Fentons on the airlines, ruled with an iron fist, feared and loathed, but the customer's got good service when you were running the show.
Absolutely, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day, customer service. Now, recently we flew, you and I, we flew up to the Gold Coast. We went up with Qantas. It was an okay service. Wasn't amazing. It was okay. We flew back a different airline. The service on the other airline flying back was, in my opinion, disgusting. Will I be likely to go back and fly that airline again based on the customer service I experienced that day? No. But reset the button for the staff there, get over it, embrace Vanessa, welcome her, feed back to her the issues, and help reshape Qantas.
So, Jake, your kind of insight here is that you've probably written more stories about aviation than any other journalist in Australia the last 6 months, which checks out. You're writing for Australian Aviation. You'd be worried if you were. So you've written probably hundreds of stories, and many of them about Qantas. So you've seen this kind of story develop over the last 6 months. If you were advising the new CEO from a kind of a media point of view, what would she do?
As according to WordPress here, 345 stories.
345.
Look, if I was advising Vanessa Hudson, first of all, something will have gone very wrong. But secondly, and you touched on this, Chris, but the other group of people that keep your planes flying are the workforce. Engage with your workforce. You don't always have to get along with your workers, but it's as you said, Adam. Part of the bad air that's been floating around Qantas lately is that the unions have been so angry with Qantas and so angry with Alan Joyce personally over a lot of things, and so. And it's again as you said with Jane Herdlicher at Virgin, the unions despised her, but she sat down, she worked with them, she dealt with them, met them fairly across the table. And if Vanessa Hudson can take a less sort of pugnacious approach with the unions and hear them out and work to address their concerns and come to a good relationship with the unions, things at Qantas will likely get better because it's as I said, your staff are what keep your planes flying. If you don't have pilots, if you don't have cabin crew, you don't have an airline, you just have a bunch of planes.
One of the interesting things about Joyce is the impression.
Also, bring back the 747.
Oh, yes, I agree.
One of the interesting things about Joyce is you always tell the story that he would come on the plane. And he would help clean up the mess that was left behind by passengers. He would, roll up his sleeves and do that. And there's stories to this day that he still does this. So it's hard to but see him as the kind of monster he's made out to be. But what does come across is at a corporate level, he wants to win every single battle, and he's quite ruthless about doing that. Now, that's perhaps why the shareholders love him. Perhaps that's why he's seen as a huge success. But I do kind of feel that whoever comes in next, it's almost like you've got to take a few losses as well for the greater good. And I do feel that you make a very good point. You need to re-engage a workforce who clearly have lost a bit of faith.
Yeah, it's good to have a winning attitude. You want to have a winning attitude. It's good to be a fighter. It's good to be a scrapper. But as a wise man once said, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. Clearly Alan Joyce has learned the last two things, but you've got to pick your battles, and the battles that you pick cannot be all of the battles.
Well,
Correct.
On that sage-like note, that one, don't say anything else. You ended it perfectly. Don't say anything else. You ended it perfectly.
Anything else, you ended it perfectly.
We will say thank you and goodbye to Jake Nelson. You've ruined it now. You can say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. And we will say thank you and goodbye to Chris Fenton.
See you later.
We will be back on this show the same time next week. But for now, from us all, goodbye.
Goodbye.